In a small town where everyone seemed to know each other, life moved at a slow pace. The streets were lined with charming old houses, and the air carried the scent of freshly baked pies from local bakeries. But beneath this picturesque surface lay simmering tensions that no one dared to address openly. Racism was alive here, hidden behind polite smiles and whispered remarks. It wasn't loud or obvious. It didn't need to be. Its presence was felt in subtle ways, like how certain people were treated differently at stores or ignored during community meetings. Maya Carter had lived in this town her entire life. She knew its quirks, its secrets, and most importantly, its flaws. A tall, confident woman in her early 30s, Maya stood out not just because of her striking features, but also because of her sharp mind. As an investigative journalist, she had spent years shining a light on issues others preferred to sweep under the rug. Her articles often exposed corruption, inequality, and injustice, earning her both admiration and enemies. Some called her fearless, others labeled her troublemaker, but Maya didn't care about labels. All she cared about was truth. Lately, though, something had been eating away at her. For months, she'd been working on a story about police misconduct in the town. It wasn't easy. Getting information from officers wasn't exactly straightforward, but Maya was persistent. She interviewed residents, dug through public records, and pieced together fragments of evidence that painted a troubling picture. One name kept coming up: Officer Daniel Graves. Graves was a familiar figure around town. With his neatly pressed uniform and stern demeanor, he commanded respect, or at least compliance, from those he encountered. To some, he was a symbol of authority, someone who kept the peace. But to others, especially people of color, he represented something darker. Stories circulated about him pulling over black drivers without cause, making derogatory comments, and even using excessive force during arrests. No one dared report him officially. Fear of retaliation kept them silent. On a chilly evening in late autumn, Maya found herself face to face with the man she'd been investigating. She was driving home after a long day at the office when blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror. Her heart sank as she pulled over to the side of the road. When Graves approached her car, his expression gave nothing away. He tapped on her window with his flashlight, signaling for her to roll it down. "License and registration," he said curtly, his voice devoid of warmth. Maya complied, handing over the documents while keeping her tone calm and respectful. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked. "You were speeding," Graves replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced of his own words. His eyes scanned the interior of her car before settling back on her face. "Do you know how fast you were going?" "I'm pretty sure I was within the limit," Maya responded evenly, meeting his gaze. She prided herself on staying composed, even in situations like this. Arguing with someone like Graves would only make things worse. Graves smirked, leaning slightly closer to her window. "Funny thing is, folks like you always seem to think they're above the rules." His words dripped with condescension, and Maya felt her stomach tighten. She recognized the thinly veiled insult for what it was, a reminder that, in his eyes, she didn't belong. She forced herself to smile politely. "I assure you, officer, I follow the law. If you have any concerns, feel free to check my record." For a moment, Graves studied her as if trying to decide whether she was mocking him. Then he straightened up, tucking her papers into his clipboard. "Wait here," he muttered before walking back to his patrol car. As soon as he was out of sight, Maya reached for her phone. Discreetly, she opened the camera app and started recording. She angled the device toward the windshield, capturing everything: the flashing lights, the cold night air, and eventually, Graves himself as he returned to her car. "Everything checks out," he announced gruffly, handing her documents back. "But next time, watch your speed." "Thank you, officer," Maya said, her voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside her. She waited until he was back in his vehicle before exhaling sharply. That encounter may have ended quietly, but it left a deep impression on her. It wasn't just the blatant disrespect. It was the realization that Graves operated with impunity, knowing full well that few would challenge him. Later that night, as Maya replayed the footage on her laptop, her resolve hardened. This wasn't the first time she'd heard stories about Graves's behavior, nor would it be the last if nothing changed. But Maya wasn't the type to sit idly by while injustice thrived. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notebook, as ideas began to form. What if she could turn the tables on Graves? What if she could expose him not just through words but through actions? The thought excited her and terrified her. Taking on someone like Graves wouldn't be easy. He had power, connections, and a badge that shielded him from accountability. But Maya had something else: intelligence, determination, and a knack for thinking several steps ahead. If anyone could bring him down, it was her. The idea took shape in her mind like a puzzle piece clicking into place. She wouldn't confront him directly. That would play right into his hands. Instead, she'd use his own tactics against him. She'd create a scenario so convincing, so airtight, that even Graves wouldn't see it coming. And when the moment came, she'd strike, not with rage, but with precision. By the time dawn broke, Maya had already drafted a plan. She reached out to her closest ally, Marcus, a tech genius who had helped her with countless investigations in the past. Together, they would build a trap so clever that Graves wouldn't stand a chance. For now, all Maya needed was patience and a little bit of luck. Little did Graves know his days of unchecked power were numbered, and Maya, she was ready to show him exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman determined to fight for justice. The next morning, Maya woke up with a sense of purpose that had been missing for weeks. The encounter with Officer Graves the previous night replayed in her mind like a broken record. Every word he'd said, every dismissive glance, every ounce of condescension. It all fueled her determination to act. But this wasn't just about revenge or teaching him a lesson. It was bigger than that. This was about exposing the truth and holding someone accountable who thought they were untouchable. Maya sat at her kitchen table sipping coffee as she opened her laptop. She reviewed the footage she'd recorded during the traffic stop, pausing it occasionally to jot down notes. Graves's body language, his tone, the way he lingered unnecessarily long near her car, every detail mattered. As she studied the video, an idea began to take shape. If Graves thrived on exploiting loopholes and bending rules, then why not use those same tactics against him? She smiled to herself, realizing she might have found the perfect way to turn the tables. Her first call was to Marcus, her best friend, and tech-savvy partner in crime when it came to investigative work. Marcus was the kind of person who could hack into anything if given enough time and ethical justification. He lived in a cluttered apartment filled with gadgets, wires, and half-built projects, but his brilliance made up for his chaotic lifestyle. When Maya explained her plan over the phone, Marcus immediately perked up. "You're serious about this?" Marcus asked, his voice tinged with both excitement and concern. "You know how risky it is to go after someone like Graves, right?" "I'm aware," Maya replied firmly. "But I can't let this slide. Not again. We've got evidence of his behavior now, and I think we can push him into making another mistake. One big enough to expose everything." Marcus hesitated for a moment before responding. "All right, count me in. What do you need?" Maya outlined her strategy. She would create a fake persona, a character so believable that Graves wouldn't suspect a thing. This persona would be vulnerable enough to attract his attention, but clever enough to trap him once he took the bait. They decided to name her Tanya Lewis, a struggling single mother trying to make ends meet while dealing with legal troubles. Tanya's backstory would include hints of financial desperation, which would pique Graves's interest if he believed she was hiding something illegal. With Marcus handling the technical side of things, Maya focused on fleshing out Tanya's identity. Using old photos of herself and some creative editing, she created social media profiles for Tanya. These accounts portrayed her as a hardworking woman, juggling multiple jobs, raising 2 young children, and constantly battling debt collectors. Posts about late-night shifts, unpaid bills, and frustrations with the system painted a vivid picture of someone living on the edge. To add authenticity, Maya even included comments from fictional friends offering words of encouragement or sympathy. Next, they needed to plant breadcrumbs online that would lead Graves straight to Tanya. Knowing his history of targeting minorities, under the guise of enforcing the law, Maya crafted posts hinting at possible illegal activity. For example, one post read, "Oh, these cash-only gigs are killing me. At least no one asks questions." Another mentioned needing to find a new buyer for something unspecified. Each message was vague enough to raise suspicion without being too obvious. While Maya worked on Tanya's digital footprint, Marcus set up surveillance tools to monitor any interactions Graves might have with the fake profile. He installed software that tracked IP addresses, flagged keywords, and recorded timestamps of activity. If Graves took the bait, they'd know exactly what he did and when. Days turned into a week as Maya and Marcus fine-tuned their plan. During this time, Maya kept tabs on Graves through public records and local news outlets. She discovered more instances of misconduct linked to him, including complaints filed by residents who claimed he harassed them during routine stops. Some victims described feeling intimidated by his aggressive questioning, while others reported being searched without probable cause. Armed with this additional information, Maya grew more confident in their approach. The more she learned about Graves, the clearer it became that he operated with reckless abandon, assuming his badge protected him from consequences. Finally, the moment arrived to launch Phase 1 of their operation. Maya posted Tanya's first bait message on a community forum frequently monitored by local law enforcement. The post read, "Anyone know where I can sell some stuff quick? Rent's due tomorrow and I'm desperate." Within hours, replies poured in from strangers suggesting pawnshops, flea markets, and online marketplaces. But among those responses was one comment that caught Maya's eye. It was short, cryptic, and written in poor grammar. "PM me. Might be able to help." Marcus traced the account back to none other than Officer Daniel Graves. Though the username didn't match his real name, the IP address confirmed it belonged to him. A chill ran down Maya's spine as she realized their plan was working faster than expected. Graves had taken the bait. Over the next few days, Maya engaged in private messages with Graves as Tanya. She played the part perfectly, expressing gratitude for his willingness to help while dropping subtle clues about her supposed illegal dealings. "I've got some items my ex left behind," she wrote. "Not sure if they're stolen or not, but I need cash fast." Graves responded eagerly, asking detailed questions about the items and where she kept them. His curiosity seemed almost predatory, feeding into Maya's growing disdain for him. As the conversation progressed, Graves suggested meeting in person to discuss further. Maya hesitated briefly before agreeing, knowing this was the critical turning point. She told him she'd arrange a time and place soon, giving herself and Marcus enough room to prepare for the next phase of the operation. They rented a small house in a quiet neighborhood, equipping it with hidden cameras, microphones, and props designed to look like evidence of illicit activity. Everything was carefully staged to make it appear as though Tanya had indeed been involved in something shady. The day of the sting arrived, and Maya felt a mix of excitement and nerves coursing through her veins. Everything was in place: the rented house, the hidden cameras, the fake evidence. But she knew this was the moment where things could either go perfectly according to plan or spiral out of control. One wrong move, one overlooked detail, and Graves might catch on. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that preparation had been meticulous. Marcus had double-checked every camera angle, every microphone feed, and every prop scattered around the house. The stage was set. Now it was time for the actor to take center stage. Maya slipped into character as Tanya Lewis, donning a worn-out sweater and pulling her hair into a messy bun. She wanted to look disheveled yet believable, a woman overwhelmed by life's challenges. Before leaving for the house, she glanced at herself in the mirror and whispered, "You've got this." Then, grabbing her phone and a small bag filled with essentials, she headed out. Meanwhile, Marcus was stationed in a van parked 2 blocks away from the house. Inside, he had monitors displaying live feeds from the hidden cameras strategically placed throughout the property. He wore headphones to listen in on any conversations and kept his laptop open, ready to document every second of what unfolded. His role was crucial. He would ensure nothing was missed while Maya handled the face-to-face interaction with Graves. At exactly 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. Maya opened the door to find Officer Daniel Graves standing there, dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket instead of his uniform. This wasn't unusual. Graves often conducted off-duty investigations under the guise of helping residents, though everyone knew these situations rarely ended well for the people involved. His demeanor was calm but calculating, his sharp eyes scanning the interior of the house before settling on Maya. "Tanya?" he asked, feigning friendliness. "That's me," Maya replied softly, stepping aside to let him in. "Thanks for coming." Graves nodded, brushing past her without another word. As he entered the living room, his gaze swept over the cluttered space, dirty dishes piled in the sink, bills strewn across the coffee table, and an old suitcase tucked in the corner. It was all part of the setup, designed to make the house appear lived in and chaotic. Graves seemed satisfied, his suspicions growing stronger with each passing second. "So," he began, turning to face Maya, "you mentioned having some items you wanted to get rid of." Maya hesitated for dramatic effect, biting her lip nervously. "Yeah, I'm not really sure what they are. My ex left them behind when he moved out and I haven't touched them since. But rent's due tomorrow and I need money desperately." Graves crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "What kind of items?" "I think they're electronics," Maya said, shrugging. "There's a box in the bedroom closet. I haven't even opened it." Without waiting for permission, Graves strode toward the hallway, clearly intent on finding the box himself. Maya followed closely behind, her heart pounding. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. The point where Graves's arrogance would lead him straight into their trap. In the bedroom, Graves located the cardboard box sitting innocuously on the top shelf of the closet. He pulled it down and opened it, revealing a jumble of wires, circuit boards, and other components that looked suspiciously like stolen tech equipment. Maya watched silently as his eyes lit up with interest. Or perhaps greed. Whatever it was, she knew he'd taken the bait completely. "You shouldn't have these lying around," Graves said sternly, glancing back at her. "Do you realize how much trouble you could be in if someone found out?" "I didn't steal them," Maya protested, playing the part of a frightened woman trying to defend herself. "I swear I had no idea they were here." Graves ignored her plea, setting the box aside and pulling out his phone. "I'll need to call this in," he announced, already dialing a number. "We can't just ignore something like this." But Maya wasn't worried. In fact, she smiled inwardly, knowing exactly what was about to happen next. Graves's eagerness to report the discovery without proper authorization was precisely what they needed to expose him. Unbeknownst to him, every word he spoke and every action he took was being captured on camera. As Graves continued talking on the phone, Maya noticed something odd. He kept referring to specific cases and names, mentioning connections within the police department that shouldn't exist. It became clear that Graves wasn't just acting alone. He was part of a larger web of corruption. Her stomach churned as she realized the scope of what they were uncovering went far beyond one racist cop. It implicated the entire system. Suddenly, Graves hung up and turned back to her, his expression grim. "Look, Tanya, I'll try to help you out here, but you need to cooperate fully. If you give me any reason to doubt your story, things will get complicated." Maya nodded quickly, pretending to be intimidated. "Of course, officer. I'll do whatever you say." Satisfied, Graves began searching the rest of the house, looking for more evidence. What he didn't know was that Marcus had planted additional incriminating items throughout the property. Fake documents linking Graves to previous misconduct cases, forged emails implicating higher-ups in the department, and even audio recordings of fabricated confessions. Each item was carefully designed to paint a damning picture of systemic corruption. As Graves rifled through drawers and cabinets, his confidence grew shakier. He stumbled upon a folder labeled Internal Affairs Reports and froze, his face pale. Flipping through the pages, he saw his own name mentioned repeatedly alongside accusations of abuse of power, racial profiling, and falsified reports. Panic flickered in his eyes as he realized he'd walked into a nightmare. "What is this?" he demanded, spinning around to confront Maya. "Where did you get these?" Maya played dumb, shrugging helplessly. "I told you my ex left all kinds of stuff behind. I don't know anything about those papers." Graves clenched his fists, torn between anger and fear. For the first time, Maya saw cracks in his facade. The cocky, self-assured officer was gone, replaced by a man desperate to cover his tracks. He muttered curses under his breath, pacing back and forth as he tried to figure out his next move. Unbeknownst to him, Marcus was already uploading the footage to a secure server, preparing to release it to the public once the operation was complete. Every illegal search, every discriminatory comment, every unethical decision Graves made during this encounter would soon be exposed for the world to see. By the time Graves finally stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, Maya allowed herself a small smile of triumph. Their plan had worked flawlessly. Not only had they caught him red-handed, but they'd also uncovered evidence tying him to a broader network of corruption. Now it was up to the court of public opinion, and eventually, the legal system, to decide his fate. Back in the van, Marcus gave her a thumbs up through the monitor. "You nailed it," he said over the comm system. "Now let's finish this." Maya nodded, feeling a surge of determination. They weren't done yet. The real battle was just beginning. The footage of Officer Daniel Graves's illegal activities at the rented house spread like wildfire. Within hours of uploading it online, the video went viral, capturing the attention of not just the local community, but people across the country. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags like Reach and Expose Graves and Justice for All, as users shared clips, screenshots, and commentary about the shocking revelations. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, turning what had started as a personal mission for Maya into a national conversation about police misconduct and systemic racism. At first, the town reacted with disbelief. Many residents found it hard to reconcile the image of Graves, the stern yet authoritative figure they'd trusted to keep their streets safe, with the man caught on camera conducting unauthorized searches and making prejudiced remarks. But, as more details emerged, skepticism gave way to outrage. The evidence was undeniable. Graves had violated protocol, abused his power, and targeted vulnerable individuals based solely on their race or socioeconomic status. What made matters worse was the implication that he wasn't acting alone. His connections to higher-ups within the police department suggested a culture of corruption that ran deep. Public pressure mounted quickly. Protesters gathered outside the police station, holding signs that read "No justice, no peace," and chanting slogans demanding accountability. Local leaders, who had previously turned a blind eye to complaints against officers like Graves, were forced to address the growing unrest. The mayor issued a statement promising an internal investigation, though many dismissed it as too little, too late. Meanwhile, calls for Graves's immediate suspension grew louder, with petitions circulating online garnering tens of thousands of signatures. For Maya, watching the fallout unfold was both gratifying and overwhelming. She hadn't anticipated the scale of the response her operation would generate. Messages poured in from strangers thanking her for exposing the truth, while others reached out to share their own experiences of mistreatment at the hands of law enforcement. Some even offered to testify if it meant bringing Graves and his colleagues to justice. It was heartening to see so many people rallying together, united by a desire for change. But the victory came with complications. Graves, cornered and humiliated, refused to go down quietly. Instead of accepting responsibility for his actions, he lashed out, filing a defamation lawsuit against Maya. In legal documents submitted to court, he accused her of entrapment, claiming she had deliberately set him up to tarnish his reputation. He argued that the evidence against him was fabricated and that her motives were malicious rather than altruistic. To make matters worse, his lawyers painted him as the victim of a smear campaign, orchestrated by someone seeking revenge for a minor traffic stop. The lawsuit threw Maya into uncharted territory. While she had always known there would be risks involved in taking on someone like Graves, she hadn't expected to face such aggressive retaliation. Doubts crept in as she considered the potential consequences, not just for herself, but for Marcus, who had played a key role in gathering and disseminating the evidence. Could they prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that everything they'd done was legitimate? And even if they succeeded, would the public continue to support them once the legal battle dragged on? Despite these challenges, Maya remained resolute. With Marcus's help, she hired a top-tier civil rights attorney named Patricia Hayes, known for her work defending victims of police brutality. Patricia was sharp, experienced, and unafraid to take on powerful opponents. During their initial meeting, she listened intently as Maya explained every step of the operation, nodding thoughtfully when shown the video footage and supporting documents. "You've done your homework," Patricia said after reviewing the materials. "This isn't just about proving Graves guilty. It's about dismantling the system that allowed him to operate unchecked for so long. We'll need witnesses, experts, and irrefutable proof to build a strong case." Over the following weeks, Maya worked tirelessly alongside Patricia to prepare for the trial. They tracked down former victims of Graves's misconduct, convincing them to come forward despite their fears of retribution. One woman recounted how Graves had arrested her teenage son during a routine traffic stop, alleging possession of drugs without evidence. Another man described being detained for hours simply because he fit the description of a suspect, a vague term often used to justify racial profiling. Each testimony added weight to their argument, painting a broader picture of systemic abuse. Meanwhile, Patricia enlisted forensic analysts to authenticate the video footage and other digital evidence. She also brought in experts on policing practices to highlight how Graves's behavior deviated from standard procedures. Every piece of the puzzle was carefully assembled to ensure nothing could be disputed in court. As preparations continued, the scandal grew bigger than anyone anticipated. More allegations surfaced linking Graves to past incidents of excessive force, falsified reports, and discriminatory behavior. Other officers began distancing themselves from him, fearing association with his tarnished name. Even some of his closest colleagues hinted at internal rifts, suggesting that Graves had long been a problematic figure within the department. Yet amidst the chaos, Graves clung to denial. In interviews with sympathetic media outlets, he doubled down on his claims of innocence, portraying himself as a scapegoat targeted by activists bent on discrediting law enforcement. His supporters rallied behind him, arguing that Maya's actions amounted to vigilantism and undermined trust in the justice system. For a brief moment, it seemed like public opinion might shift in his favor, but then something remarkable happened. A whistleblower stepped forward, an unexpected twist that changed the game entirely. This individual, a former partner of Graves, revealed damning information about widespread corruption within the police force. According to the whistleblower, Graves wasn't an isolated bad apple. He was part of a network that routinely manipulated evidence, intimidated witnesses, and covered up misconduct to protect its members. The whistleblower provided documents, emails, and recordings corroborating these claims, further implicating Graves and his superiors. The revelation reignited public fury and shifted the narrative back in Maya's favor. Suddenly, the focus wasn't just on Graves, it was on the entire institution that enabled his behavior. Calls for reform intensified, with activists urging lawmakers to implement stricter oversight measures and greater transparency in policing practices. Community leaders organized town hall meetings to discuss solutions, inviting experts, advocates, and concerned citizens to participate in shaping a better future. Through it all, Maya stayed grounded. Though the spotlight was firmly on her now, she never lost sight of why she'd embarked on this journey in the first place. This wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about accountability and justice. As the trial date approached, she reminded herself that no matter the outcome, she had already achieved something significant. She had sparked a movement. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial, buzzing with anticipation. Reporters jostled for seats in the gallery, their cameras clicking furiously as Maya walked in alongside her attorney, Patricia Hayes. Every eye in the room seemed to follow her, some filled with admiration, others with skepticism. Officer Daniel Graves sat at the defendant's table, flanked by his high-powered legal team. His expression was unreadable, though there was a tension in his posture that hadn't been there before. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a public spectacle, and everyone wanted to see how it would unfold. Patricia opened the proceedings with a powerful opening statement. She painted a vivid picture of systemic corruption, framing Graves not as an isolated bad actor, but as a symptom of a much larger problem within law enforcement. "This case isn't about one officer," she declared, her voice steady and commanding. "It's about exposing a culture of abuse and holding those responsible accountable. The evidence will show that Officer Graves repeatedly violated the rights of innocent citizens, using his badge as a weapon rather than a shield." Graves's defense attorney countered with a fiery rebuttal, accusing Maya and her team of orchestrating a witch hunt. He argued that the sting operation was unethical and designed solely to entrap his client. "My client is being scapegoated because of his dedication to enforcing the law," he said, gesturing toward Graves. "What we have here is not justice, it's revenge." As the trial progressed, both sides presented their cases with equal intensity. Prosecution witnesses took the stand first, recounting harrowing stories of encounters with Graves. A young black man described being pulled over multiple times without cause, only to be subjected to invasive searches and humiliating remarks. A Latina mother tearfully recounted how Graves had detained her during a routine traffic stop, leaving her children stranded in the car for hours while he conducted what she called an interrogation. Each testimony added another layer to the portrait of a man who operated with impunity, believing himself untouchable. Maya herself testified near the end of the prosecution's case. Dressed in a simple yet professional outfit, she spoke calmly and confidently, recounting the events leading up to the sting operation. She explained her motivations, not vengeance, but a desire to expose the truth, and detailed every step of the plan, from creating the fake persona of Tanya Lewis to setting up the rented house. When questioned by Graves's attorney, she remained composed, deflecting attempts to paint her as vindictive or dishonest. "You admit to deceiving my client, don't you?" Graves's lawyer asked, his tone sharp. "I admit to exposing him," Maya replied evenly. "There's a difference between deception and revealing someone's true nature. Officer Graves showed us exactly who he is when he walked into that house and broke the law." The defense tried to cast doubt on the authenticity of the video footage and other evidence, suggesting it had been tampered with. But forensic analysts, brought in by Patricia, confirmed beyond any reasonable doubt that the recordings were genuine and unaltered. They also highlighted inconsistencies in Graves's own statements, pointing out contradictions between his version of events and the documented facts. Just when it seemed like the tide might turn in favor of the prosecution, Graves's defense introduced a surprise witness, a former colleague named Detective Michael Ryan. Ryan had worked closely with Graves for years and was expected to vouch for his integrity. Instead, what followed was a bombshell revelation that stunned everyone in the courtroom. Under cross-examination by Patricia, Ryan admitted to witnessing numerous instances of misconduct committed by Graves and others in the department. "I stayed silent because I didn't want to lose my job," Ryan confessed, his voice trembling. "But after seeing everything that's come out, I can't keep quiet anymore. What happened in that house wasn't unusual. It was business as usual for Officer Graves." Ryan went on to describe specific cases where Graves had falsified reports, planted evidence, and intimidated victims to protect himself and his colleagues. He even revealed that Graves had bragged about targeting minorities, claiming they were less likely to file complaints due to fear of retaliation. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the gravity of these admissions sank in. Graves visibly paled as Ryan spoke, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. His attorney attempted to discredit the whistleblower, accusing him of lying to save face or seek attention. But Ryan stood firm, providing documentation, including internal memos and emails, that corroborated his claims. By the time he stepped down from the stand, the damage had been done. Graves's carefully constructed facade was crumbling under the weight of undeniable proof. Closing arguments came next, and both sides delivered impassioned speeches. Patricia urged the jury to consider not just the individual actions of Graves, but the broader implications of letting such behavior go unpunished. "Justice isn't blind," she said, her voice ringing through the courtroom. "It sees everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today, you have the power to send a message that no one is above the law, regardless of their title or uniform." Graves' attorney made one final plea for leniency, arguing that his client had simply been doing his job and had made mistakes under pressure. But the jury didn't seem convinced. After nearly 3 days of deliberation, they returned with a verdict that sent shockwaves through the room. On all counts, the foreperson announced, "We find the defendant guilty." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery as the words sank in. Some people cheered softly, while others clapped quietly in solidarity. Maya sat still, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, processing the enormity of what had just happened. Graves stared straight ahead, his face devoid of emotion, as if refusing to acknowledge the reality of his situation. The judge wasted no time delivering a stern rebuke. "Officer Graves," she began, her voice firm, "your actions represent a gross violation of trust and a betrayal of the principles this institution stands for. You abused your authority, targeted innocent individuals based on prejudice, and contributed to a culture of fear and injustice. For that, you will be held accountable." With those words, Graves was stripped of his badge and sentenced to prison. The decision marked a significant victory, not just for Maya, but for everyone who had suffered at the hands of corrupt officers like him. It was a moment of reckoning, a reminder that even those who wield power are not immune to consequences. As the courtroom emptied, reporters swarmed around Maya, eager to capture her reaction. She smiled faintly, exhaustion evident in her eyes. "This isn't the end," she told them. "It's just the beginning. There's still so much work to be done." Behind her, Marcus gave a thumbs up, grinning despite the long journey they'd endured. Together, they had taken on a seemingly unbeatable opponent, and won. But Maya knew better than anyone that the fight against systemic racism and corruption wouldn't stop here. It was a marathon, not a sprint, and she was ready to keep running. The verdict against Officer Daniel Graves sent shockwaves through the small town and beyond. For many residents, it was a moment of validation, a confirmation that their voices mattered and that justice could prevail, even in the face of entrenched power structures. But for Maya Carter, the victory felt bittersweet. Yes, Graves had been held accountable, but she knew all too well that his conviction didn't erase the years of pain he'd inflicted on countless individuals. It also didn't dismantle the systemic issues that allowed people like him to thrive unchecked. In the days following the trial, Maya found herself reflecting on what had transpired. The whirlwind of media attention began to die down, giving her a rare moment of quiet. Sitting alone in her apartment one evening, she scrolled through messages from strangers who had reached out to thank her. Some shared stories of their own, struggles with law enforcement, while others expressed gratitude for inspiring them to speak up about injustices they'd witnessed. Each message reminded her why she had taken this risk in the first place. Not for personal glory, but to create change. But Maya wasn't satisfied with simply exposing one corrupt officer. She understood that true progress required more than just holding individuals accountable. It demanded systemic reform. With Marcus by her side, she started brainstorming ways to channel the momentum generated by the trial into something lasting. They decided to launch a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting victims of police misconduct and advocating for policy changes within law enforcement agencies. The initiative, which they named Justice Rising, quickly gained traction. Its mission was twofold: to provide legal resources and emotional support to those affected by discriminatory policing practices, and to push for transparency and accountability in law enforcement. Maya partnered with civil rights attorneys, community leaders, and activists who shared her vision. Together, they organized workshops, hosted town hall meetings, and lobbied local officials to implement reforms such as mandatory body cameras, independent oversight boards, and stricter penalties for officers found guilty of misconduct. One of Justice Rising's most impactful projects was a database designed to track complaints against police officers across the country. Modeled after similar efforts in other cities, the platform allowed users to submit anonymous reports detailing their experiences with law enforcement. These submissions were then reviewed by a team of volunteers who flagged patterns of misconduct and worked with legal experts to pursue investigations where necessary. Within months of its launch, the database became a vital tool for communities seeking to hold abusive officers accountable. As word of Justice Rising spread, so did Maya's reputation. She was invited to speak at conferences, universities, and rallies, sharing her story and urging others to join the fight for justice. Her speeches resonated deeply with audiences because she spoke not as someone untouched by hardship, but as a survivor who had turned her pain into purpose. "We can't wait for change to come to us," she often said during these talks. "We have to demand it, and if the system won't listen, we build our own." Despite her growing influence, Maya remained grounded. She never sought the spotlight or craved recognition. In fact, she preferred working behind the scenes, strategizing with her team and mentoring young activists eager to make a difference. One of her proudest achievements was mentoring a group of high school students who had started their own advocacy club. Inspired by Maya's courage, they organized protests, created educational campaigns about racial profiling, and even drafted a petition calling for reforms in their school resource officer program. Of course, the journey wasn't without challenges. There were moments when the weight of everything, the constant scrutiny, the threats, the emotional toll, felt overwhelming. Some nights, Maya lay awake wondering whether she was doing enough or if the battles ahead were simply too big to win. But whenever doubt crept in, she reminded herself of the faces she'd seen at rallies, the hands she'd shaken after speeches, and the emails she'd received from people whose lives had been changed by her work. Those reminders fueled her determination to keep pushing forward. Meanwhile, life in the town began to shift in subtle yet meaningful ways. The scandal surrounding Graves forced local authorities to take complaints against officers more seriously. Several departments implemented new training programs focused on de-escalation techniques, implicit bias awareness, and community engagement. While some critics argued these measures were superficial band-aids rather than real solutions, Maya saw them as stepping stones toward larger conversations about reimagining public safety. On a chilly autumn morning nearly a year after the trial, Maya stood outside the courthouse where Graves had been convicted. A crowd had gathered there once again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Instead of anger and despair, there was hope, a palpable sense of unity among the diverse group of protesters, supporters, and advocates chanting slogans like, "No more silence," and "Accountability now." Maya climbed onto a makeshift stage, her heart swelling as she looked out at the sea of faces. "Today," she began, her voice steady and strong, "we celebrate a victory. But let me be clear, this is not the end of our fight. This is just the beginning. We've shown the world that when we stand together, we can challenge even the most powerful systems. We've proven that justice isn't just an idea. It's something we create every single day through our actions and our choices." Her words were met with thunderous applause, and for a moment, Maya allowed herself to feel proud, not just of what she had accomplished, but of the collective strength of everyone standing beside her. Change wouldn't happen overnight, and the road ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with obstacles. But as long as people refused to stay silent, as long as they continued to demand better, Maya believed anything was possible. Later that evening, as the rally dispersed and the streets grew quiet, Maya returned home to find Marcus waiting for her. He greeted her with a wide grin and a bottle of sparkling cider. "To Justice Rising," he said, raising a glass. "And to you, Maya. You've done incredible things." Maya smiled softly, clinking her glass against his. "Not me," she corrected gently. "Us, and everyone else out there fighting for a better future." As they sat together, talking late into the night about plans for the nonprofit and dreaming of what might come next. Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle against systemic racism and corruption was far from over, but she had proven that even the smallest spark could ignite a movement. And for now, that was enough.